You believe the goal with Hamas leaders is to get everybody in, to get Hezbollah in, to get the Palestinian Authority in, get the terrorists, ISIS, in from Syria. Is that the big picture goal?
Yeah, Brian, it's a great question. You know, Khalid Mashal, he's the leader of Hamas. You can say anything you want about them. They're evil. They're terrorists. I wish they did not exist. But what we do know is they're smart. They're not naive. And they knew that there would be serious repercussions for an attack like this. And that was the catalyst that they wanted. They want Israel to respond violently. And Israel has to, because the things that happen to their citizens, you cannot just allow to happen. But by doing that, that might be the catalyst that everybody else needs. Taliban, ISIS-K, Hezbollah, for them to have their excuse to be united under jihad to attack Israel. So, you know, this is a very, very dangerous. You know, it's a tinderbox there right now. It always is, but this is something different. This is one bomb away from everything going nuclear.
The scriptures clearly speak about a time of great hostility in the end times towards Israel. In fact, Bill Salas does this great thing on Psalm 83, and the psalm reads this way. It says, "With cunning they conspire against your people. They plot against those you cherish. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more." That's almost a literal statement that comes out of the Palestinian authorities and Hamas when they talk about Israel today.
I want to get a different perspective now on Hamas. I'm joined now by Musab Hassan Youssef. He's the author of Son of Hamas, and he joins us live. You know, your father was a founding member of Hamas, and you were groomed to take a leadership position. Eventually, you converted to Christianity, rejected their political and military objectives. Why did you do that?
Well, for the simple reasons that we see right now in Gaza, that Hamas does not care about the lives of Palestinians, does not care about the lives of Israelis or Americans. They don't care about their own lives. They consider dying for the sake of their ideology a way of worship. And how can you continue in that society?
Okay. I'll ask you the same question I asked my last guest. Can you coexist with someone whose mission is your destruction?
Well, Hamas is not seeking coexistence and compromise. Hamas is seeking conquest and taking over. And by the way, Israel, the destruction of the state of Israel is not Hamas' final destination. Hamas' final destination is building the Islamic Khilafah, which means an Islamic state on the rubble of every other civilization. These are the ultimate goals of the movement.
Israel's reprisal is underway tonight. It is massive, intensifying, and could trigger a regional war.
Richard, I've been watching your camera feed out of the corner of my eye. You're by the Gaza border, and it looks quite active there tonight.
Yes, Lester, Israel is continuing to carry out airstrikes into the Gaza Strip all night. And we know that there are between 500 and 600 Palestinian Americans in Gaza, and that negotiations are underway with the U.S., Israel, and Egypt to evacuate them. And based on what we see here, they are in imminent danger.
And we actually spoke with one man, originally from Ireland, who was separated from his 8-year-old daughter. She had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house who also lived in the kibbutz. And he described to us the agonizing moment after 2 days of waiting for answers. He was rescued. He finally found out that his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had been killed. And listen to his reaction to that news, Wolf.
They just said, "We found Emily. She's dead." And I went, "Yes!" I went, "Yes!" and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for. She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. That is worse than death. The way they treat you. They'd have no food, they'd have no water, She'd be in a dark room filled with Christ knows how many people and terrified every minute, hour, day, and possible years to come. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
Wolf, he went on to say to me, what kind of a crazy world is this that we are living in? That a father would actually say this, that a father would actually feel this way.
Every time I talk to you, you're trying to do the right thing, and the State Department seems to be blocking you. How frustrating is this?
It's I keep reliving. It's like I'm in deja vu of this worst nightmare over and over again, whether it's Ukraine or Afghanistan or Sudan. You know, like, let's not forget that China is on the door of Taiwan. This, while all eyes are looking at Israel, we could have another international crisis that could kick off at any moment. The private flights, even, you know, from the Israeli government, they are restricting a lot of flights in fear of knowing who they want control right now. And I understand that they have to have control. They are on the precipice of World War III in the region, the eradication of their state. You know, this was the worst single-day death of Jews since the Holocaust, and my heart is with them in the sense that they are trying to fight for their lives, their very existence right now.
And he says, and then he describes who they are, the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites. Interesting. Who are these people? Of Moab and the Hagarites and Gebel and Ammon and Amalek and Philistia and Tyre. Well, in Assyria, if you look at a map of Israel and you look at all the countries that surround Israel today, those are the same people he's speaking of here. The countries of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and even the Bedouins are mentioned. The Hagarites are probably the Bedouin people. He's talking about these people are all conspiring, these nations are all conspiring against Israel. What's interesting is that we find that Egypt is never mentioned amongst those who come against Israel. And they're the only country in the Middle East, only Muslim country in the world, who has ever entered into a peace agreement and is currently at peace and in cooperation with Israel against the ISIS terrorists and so forth. There was a brief blip in the Arab Spring where Hamas became empowered and the Muslim Brotherhood came against Israel, but they were removed rather quickly and replaced by a government that does recognize the necessity of working with Israel against terrorism.
The Egyptian government, I think, is going to be pulled in two different directions here, watching very carefully to protect itself, but to see whether or not it can also help tamp down some of the extreme parts of this war.
Well, and Egyptian leaders have also paid a huge price. I mean, Anwar Sadat was assassinated in part, well, because of his negotiated peace with Israel. How politically difficult is it for them to get involved in this sort of conflict?
You know, I was stationed in Egypt during Sadat's assassination. I saw firsthand a population that was largely supportive of the idea that there would not be any more wars with Israel, but a minority, Muslim Brotherhood infiltrators into the army that decided to take matters into their own hands. And that's been part of the tension within Egypt ever since the peace treaty was signed in 1979. For that reason, the Egyptians have always sought for themselves a role in which they could probably advance or try to advance the prospects of a broader peace so that their individual peace with Israel would not be isolated. And they've tried hard, but you know, the peace process hasn't been very successful. And once again, they're going to be caught in this bind about protecting themselves and trying to end the violence.
Isn't that part of the broader issue, though, is every time that these countries have come close to peace or the broader region has come close to peace or normalized relations with Israel, there's been a huge human toll. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated after the peace deal, after standing on the steps of the White House and getting to a peace deal with the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, at that time. There are actors in the region who, you tell me, do they want anything more than just endless conflict or just the complete annihilation of Israel, or, on the other hand, the complete annihilation of any idea of Palestine?
Well, I think it's clear that the non-state actors that we're watching now, Hamas, Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, are not interested in a peace deal. They want to scotch the idea of Arab-Israeli normalization. But it's important to remember, Katie, that the two peace breakthroughs in our lifetime, the treaty with Egypt in 1979 and the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991, actually followed wars or uprisings. In other words, there is a possibility that there is an opportunity in a situation of violence or war which diplomats and statesmen might be able to exploit. That's going to be the challenge, not just for Egypt, but for the United States and Europe and much of the global community. It's not going to emanate from Hamas. It's not going to emanate from Hezbollah. But to what extent can a diplomatic pathway be forged out of this? Too early to suggest what that might be. But that's really the only way to get out of this cycle of wars that try to prevent peace from happening.
It tells us in Revelation 6 that the Antichrist first rises to world power and prominence. And it says he enters into a covenant with the Jews. In Daniel 9:27, he says he will confirm a covenant with many of them for seven years. And in the middle of the 7, he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering, which is when he puts, in the middle of the tribulation, he puts his image in the temple and creates what's called the abomination that makes desolate. And on the wings of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. So that what happens, something has to happen to Islam that makes it no longer a factor. And I think that the destruction of the entire political structure, because that's what the battle of Gog and Magog does, these armies are decimated, they're wiped out, and there's no opposition any longer. In fact, it says in chapter 39 that the destruction that will come upon these nations will be literally fire that God will bring from heaven. It'll be so clear that God has destroyed them and that he is on Israel's side at that moment that I think people will turn away from Islam and it'll be a forsaken religion, and they will literally pull down the Dome of the Rock and they will rebuild the temple on that mount, at which point when they finish it halfway through the tribulation, then the Antichrist betrays them and sets his image and commands that he be worshipped. And no man can buy or sell unless he receives the mark of the beast. Which brings me to my final sign of the last times, and that is what I talked about on Sunday morning, one world government.